In this video, we will cover running interference checks and reviewing interferences. When working in Revit, it's important that you coordinate with other disciplines, others on your team, and even yourself. You can do this by running interference checks. Let's take a look at how this works. On the Collaborate ribbon, in the Coordinate panel, expand the Interference Check button and select Run Interference Check. In the Interference Check dialog, there are essentially two sides. You can select categories of elements on the left and choose to run an interference check between the categories of elements that you select on the right. The first thing you can do is choose categories from, and this can either be the current project or any linked Revit model. I'll select current project on the left, and then once again on the right you can either select current project or any linked Revit model. I'll select current project again, and then on the left I'll select electrical equipment, electrical fixtures, and lighting devices and lighting fixtures. And then on the right I'll select air terminals, duct fittings, and ducts. And we can run an interference check between these categories of elements. You can also use the buttons at the bottom to help you narrow down your selections. Once you are ready to run the interference check, click OK, and then Revit will run the interference check. When complete, an interference report will appear. To begin, you can choose how you want to group the clashes. Category 1 are the categories that you selected on the left, and Category 2 are those that you selected on the right. So if we select Category 1, we are grouping them based on the electrical categories that we selected. And in this case, we only have clashes between lighting fixtures. I'll select Category 2 and then Category 1. That way we can have a listing for each lighting fixture. Now, when you select a clash grouping, first off, it'll highlight in the model if it's visible in that view, or you can expand that listing and then see the specific elements. And you can see the category of element, the type, the mark, and also the element ID. And once again, if it is visible in the model, then it will highlight. For example, this one is highlighted here. If it's not visible, you can click Show, and then Revit will either zoom into it in the current view or open a view if it's not currently visible. Once again, you can expand it, select individual components, and then you can also leave this interference report dialog open and then work with components in the model. So for example, I'll select the lighting fixture and I can manipulate it just like I would normally in Revit. In this case, I just have this dialog open. So what I will do is I will select the lighting fixture, and then in the contextual ribbon, I'll click Selection Box. And then I will type CE to zoom to extents. And then I can orbit around here and see the clash that we have here. So in this case, I can see the flex duct that's coming in and going right through the lighting fixture. Now I will switch back to first off I want to check the orientation here and then switch back to the floor plan view. And now typically the lighting fixture would have priority, but for sake of example we will move this, move it 2 feet down, and then we'll switch back to the 3D view and we can see that we've resolved this clash here. Now when you are resolving clashes, you can click Refresh in the interference report, and Revit will rerun the interference check based on the same categories of elements that were selected. And now in this case we can see that one of our clashes was resolved and we can continue working. You can also click Close to close the interference report, and then if you want to see the same interference report, go back to the Collaborate ribbon And in the coordinate panel, expand the interference check button and select Show Last Report. And then that last interference report will open again. For this example, I'll click Close, and then we'll run another interference check. So I'll select Run Interference Check, and then this time I will select Electrical Equipment and Electrical Fixtures. And then on the right, I'm going to select categories from the linked architectural model, and we'll select Walls. And then I'll click OK. Now I have another interference report, and I can see all of the, once again, I can choose how I'm going to group it, so I'll change it back to category 1, and then I can see all the electrical fixtures that are clashing with walls. Now in some cases this may be fine, so let me select one and click Show, and sometimes it really doesn't help you much if it zooms way out. But in some cases we have electrical fixtures that are actually placed on walls, and so depending on how it's placed you may get a clash for that instance, and so that may be fine and you'll just ignore it. But as you can see, you can run interference checks between items in your model, and then you can also run them between items in your model and any linked models. We'll run one more, and this time I'm going to select electrical equipment and electrical fixtures, and then we'll clash it between lighting devices and lighting fixtures, and I'll click OK. And if there are no interferences detected, you will get a dialog stating that with an emphatic exclamation point there, because that's great news when we get this dialog. So run interference checks, resolve those clashes, and then hopefully you can get this dialog.